Did you have a moment where you said, I can no longer be this bully bouncer, Geoff Thompson, and I need to make the transition? Because
Yeah.
many of your former coworkers probably never made that transition.
No,
Or it was
no.
made for them by going to prison or getting
Yeah.
stabbed, or maybe they still can't figure it out.
That's very
How did
true.
you evolve? Is it your nature?
I can tell you one point. I'd been brought up a Christian, so I got a foundation of spiritual life or an inner life, but I'd lost it somewhere along the way. Then I got into a fight one night. I've been in a lot of fights and I'd nearly killed a few people, more by accident than anything else, or more just because I was so aggressive. But this one particular night, I really destroyed this guy. I'd been trying to pull away from the violence. I've been trying to avoid it. And this one particular person, ironically, was a karate guy. He was another black belt. And he just kept pushing me. In the end, I said to him, "What's wrong with you? You got a problem with me?"
He was at the club.
This was in a pub, yeah.
Pub.
This was in a pub. He's just a guy in a pub who looked at me and took a disliking to me. I was balding. I was articulate. I was soft-spoken. I'd got a massive reputation as a fighter, so I don't know how he got past that. He just must have thought, this, I fancy this. And he just kept bumping into me when I was collecting glasses and stuff. And I said to my friend Seymour, who was a guy I was working with, I said, "Has he got a problem? What's wrong with him?" He goes, "Yeah, he just doesn't like you." So I went over and said, "Do you want to talk outside," in inverted commas? And he goes, "Yeah, actually, I would like to talk." And I went outside and he was just completely out of his league. But of course, I'd been trying to avoid violence for so long. All of this violence just spilled out of me. I just battered him. I completely destroyed him. And when he was unconscious and someone was lifting him up, I've seen him coming around and knocked him out again. I backheeled him in the face. It was savage. I'm not proud of it. But when he was on the floor, he was like he was dead, and people were saying he's dead. And when they took him to a car to take him to hospital, the toes of his shoes were dragging across the floor. And I just remember feeling this horror. I couldn't believe what I'd done. Something had been released from me. And it was really weird. I was driving home from the pub. This is a place called the Devon. And it was like the veil had dropped. I'd lost my liberty. I'd even lost my place in the hereafter. And I was driving through the streets and everything was sparkling. Everything was shining. And I was thinking, I'm losing this. I went home and my wife was in bed and my kids were asleep. And I remember kneeling down by my wife's side and she was so beautiful. I mean, she's beautiful anyway, but I was seeing something else. It was another dimension there. I went into my kids and they were asleep. I thought, I'm losing this. I'm losing these over because I'm just not listening. I keep acting out on this because it was something and it was pleasing me. So I remember finding my knees and saying to God I said, "Look, please let this guy live," because I was certain he was dead. Please let him live. And if you let him live, I said, I promise you, I vow that I will turn this around. I will turn it around. And it was the longest night of my life. The next day I felt sick. Anything on the program, anything on television to do with violence made me feel physically sick. I felt ill. And I was terrified of ringing up the pub I worked at to see whether they'd heard anything. It was the longest night of my life. And then eventually I rang up the pub and I said, "Look, have you heard anything?" I said, "Because I'm dying here." And he goes, he's walking around. Someone said he's walking around, he's okay. He came round. And that was it. It was a good question because I'd not thought about that. Yeah. But that was when I started to turn it around. That's when I decided to come off the door. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I could feel it. I'd had a couple of incidents. I'd destroyed a guy in a club one night who was a monster, Brian. He was a monster. He was a proper monster. He needed what I gave him. The next day I was walking through the city centre and I saw this monster walking through town with 3 kids and his wife, and he was a bomb site. His face was a bomb site, which is what I'd done to him. He got one kid hanging onto the handlebar here, one hanging onto the handlebar there, kids about my own kid's age, a baby in the pram, and his wife's just 2 steps behind him, surveying what was left of her husband's face. He was destroyed. I remember just feeling overwhelmed by what I'd done, because I could never have battered a father. I could never have battered a daddy. I could never have battered a husband. I had to dehumanise him before I could batter him. He's just a factory worker. It didn't mean he wasn't dangerous, but he didn't deserve what I gave him. So I started to bump into myself in all of these different places. And this final one was the last. I'd kind of seen it and felt it, and then, you know, and then kind of stepped away from it and forgot about it. But with this last one, I was so terrified of losing my liberty. And I remember thinking, I don't know where I'll be even beyond that. I knew I was affecting karma in a very bad way.